So chill.
Sure.
It'll be fine. Just watch me and we'll have a chat. Um, we'll just talk about you. We'll talk about this event. We'll talk
Hmm.
about the industry. We'll talk about the future. Okay.
Excellent.
So tell me your name and what you do.
So I'm Miguel Neumann. I am how could I put it? Apparently a blockchain entrepreneur. That's how it'll be classed. I tend to say that on my previous life, I had a few previous lives, but one of those was as a investment banker. I used to work for JP Morgan. Before that, I used to run digital agency. Um, so I've done quite a few things, but I have founded two companies that have gone successfully through ICOs, and I work as a consultant and advisor for other companies, all startups, all in the area of blockchain.
Oh well. Do you come from a? Would you focus on the technical aspect or the business transformational aspect, or?
The way in which I describe it, I focus on the boring stuff. And that's because sometimes it gets, many times gets overlooked. So if from some of the founders, and I always answer this with an anecdote. One of the founders I used to work with was talking about building an exchange for cryptocurrencies. It was very cool, very innovative. And I said, okay, so what are you doing about jurisdictional regulations? And he looked at me and was like, why do I need any of that? Say, all right, let me ask you a simpler question. Do you have a lawyer? And I was like, why do I need a lawyer? It's like, okay, let me get you a lawyer. And then we'll go from there. So the boring stuff, jurisdictions, regulations, taxes, customer care, sometimes marketing strategy. And for many companies that sometimes have great ideas, what they are lacking is a product definition or product structure. So that's basically what I do.
That is brilliant. We've worked a lot now with ICOs. The explainer video, the white paper, the same template website from WordPress over and over and over again.
Don't forget about the Telegram community.
How on earth does a new company stand out today?
I think that you need a couple of things. The first one is to have a good idea, one that makes sense. So you need to be resolving a problem because ultimately it goes down to that. So standing out, the first thing that you need to do is to be able to tell your story simply. And in the same way that Dom was saying it earlier in a very eloquent way, I think you need to be able to spend the time to tell something very complex in a simple way. Because if you don't, it's impossible for people to capture that and to capture people's imagination, understand what is the power, the transformation of what you're trying to do. And perhaps there's something else. I think that is that, I don't know, if you think about it not many years, but maybe 4 years ago, you wanted to put blockchain into everything and anything. The simple use cases are gone. So now it's about the complex problems, the ones that people don't want or don't know how to tackle. And again, that's why I think that it's even more valuable, this idea of just bringing it into a simple way of explaining it.
And obviously BioLife is, from my perspective, and you're going to have a strong opinion on it for yourself. For me, BioLife is one of those that is a set of many, many complex problems, many, many innovative ideas around healthcare around the world that are in silos or they have nowhere to go. Does BioLife present an opportunity to pull those things together?
I think so, and I wouldn't say that it was that much of a new idea in a way that I have been hearing projects that touches on this for a few years now, and I actually have been involved in projects like this before. It's just that I believe now the technology is in a place where it can deliver a solution that makes sense. So the very first startup that I ever worked for was a company based in the States that was doing a revolution of what was healthcare at that point in time. They were combining alternative medicine with traditional medicine, bringing an element of what it was at that point just only seen in spas, but they weren't all that popular. We're talking about 2003. So the idea of metrosexual people, which is coming about, just looking after yourself, particularly for guys, it wasn't very popular, but you're starting to say, okay, I'm healthy, I feel good about myself, therefore that's part of the well-being of a person, whereas before it was you go to the doctor if something is broken. So again, at that point we were looking into that, and again it was more unique, and I think there were components that were missing. Now all the project that I was involved on a few years back with a doctor, we were colleagues when I was studying my MBA, it was all about trying to put patient records into blockchain, just because it was an enormous amount of power in giving that information back to the actual owners of information, the patients. And for international people, I mean, I lived in 5 cities, I think, through my life that I could actually leave because I spent more than a couple months. My patient records are scattered all over. So if I want to have information of something that happened 20 years ago, I wouldn't even know how to start. So I could see from a personal point of view that that was something that was going to bring some value. So this idea of creating a platform where you have access to the information, that you can decide how and when the information is shared, that is more secure, that doesn't really require just photocopying stuff and carrying a big ledger of paper sometimes across oceans. I mean, it's contemporary, it makes sense, and it combines things that I have seen in the past that were valuable and they were bringing benefits. It's just, I believe that through blockchain now, the whole idea can be connected and put together, generating even more efficiencies.
And in terms of, I mean, for BioLife, we've got some of the component parts in place, I would say. We've got good, BioLife has good investors, partnerships, it has good people involved, experts on the panels and advisory boards. It has a good idea. Is it overstretched? Can it achieve its goals?
Well, it depends. I think that the question about goals is always not if, but when. And the way how you'd normally approach that, and I guess that I'm just being betrayed by the years I spent working in engineering, is that you're not going to build it overnight, and you cannot dream of doing a release of everything at one go. There are building blocks that are necessary in order for this to happen. To have a great team and support from investors is amazing and very much needed. To have a good technology infrastructure that allows you to digitize assets is extremely important, because it's at core. To have the ability of encrypting the different records that you're going to need in order to have these synergies around data, that's critical. But then how you translate that into a product, or how do you even release that, is what will make the difference between a failure and a successful project. I think that if there's discipline based on, okay, let's put the building blocks together, let's make sure that we have the support that we need from team and investors, let's make sure the infrastructure is right, let's start with the simple minimum building block and then scale from that, it couldn't go wrong. The worst that can happen is that the company may find that there's a plateau on which they will have to rethink and reinvent themselves to reach the broader goals. But that, for me, is still success.
No, that makes sense. I mean, we've talked a lot today about being up here in Scotland, in a very, very, very old place. You know, a lot of people we've spoken to today from the States, for example, they're a very young country, no legacy, really, in comparison to the likes of Scotland. Isn't it significant that everyone has come together, and global experts, including yourself, have come together in this place at this time, under the auspices of BioLife?
I think it's an interesting place. I mean, I was a little surprised of the slightly non-fintechy angle. And I think that is interesting because it gives people the ability of taking a moment to pause and think about it. I studied my MBA in Durham, not too far from here. in a probably equally old environment. The cathedral is 1,000 years old. And I think being a little farther away of the big cities, of the constant bustle of everything that happens, if you're in London, if you're in New York, at least make sure that you can consider what you're discussing, thinking of what is the real impact that you can affect by doing change, and especially around an area that is so important. I mean, medicine, although we haven't looked at it that much, and just the general healthcare industry is requiring a rethinking. And I don't think that you can do that through the busyness of your day, or at least for me it's very hard just to take a step back and think about it in different way. And I think that having a little more or more calm environment to think about it definitely helps. It brings those conversations more naturally and makes you reconsider, well, what are the decisions are making to have a longer lasting life that I can enjoy, and how can I ensure that I'm doing the right thing? How can I take the steps to actually take me where I want to go?
Yeah, for sure.
That's 11, that.
Okay, just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Blockchain as a facilitator, it's questionable whether it's the next iteration of the internet. It certainly empowers new ways, like all technologies, new ways of doing the same things.
Mhm.
Would you agree?
Yes and no. So I wouldn't question that is as internet was defined as a network of data, talking about blockchain as the internet of value, I think that is the best analogy that you can go into, because a paradigm shift that we have seen through blockchain is that you're decentralizing entities to centralize information, which sounds counterintuitive. But over a few talks that I participated, I think, in the last few months, we're trying to come up into this idea and why it was strange. But when you think about internet, the reason why it works is because you have several distributed points that are maintaining a central core of information. You want to access something and you check on internet. You wouldn't go and check in one particular server. And I think that when you're looking at that, that is similar to what happens with blockchain. All of a sudden you are looking, or you have the ability of looking into blockchain and saying, okay, what is the record? What is the information? Full traceability. Again, for auditors, this is unbelievably useful. It's just supporting something that wasn't ever possible before. And thinking about it, I mean, this is as big as the internet, with one big difference. That is that not only we're talking now about information, but value. And what, if not transactions, would make this new platform even more powerful?
Just finally, obviously there's announcements tonight. There's a big fanfare, a lot of heavy information and celebration of this event and the people that are here. What are the most important next steps for a company like BioLife?
The most important next steps. Delivering.
That'll do. Okay.
All right.
Thanks very much. Good man. This fella's from Durham.